Hello there, this is Dana Arcuri, author, speaker, survivor, advocate, and certified trauma recovery coach from danaarcuri.com. Thank you so much for joining me. Today's topic is of a highly sensitive nature, and this is especially for people who suffered abuse and various forms of trauma. So I consider this video a lot more psychoeducational, and it can be really helpful for different people, especially survivors of abuse and trauma, to connect the dots to various body sensations and senses and triggers and flashbacks and their lifetime experiences of being re-traumatized. Oftentimes, when we are educated and we can understand clearly what happened to us, such as the abuse, we can then come to a better place of understanding on why we react the way we react and what is going on inside our bodies. It was really interesting that in one of my classes I'm taking on somatic embodiment, my teacher said that neurology reflects psychology. And so our nervous system is deeply impacted when we are abused and traumatized. And oftentimes, years later, we're talking decades and decades after the actual abuse and traumatic event occurred, we can be triggered and we could end up reliving our past traumas. We have different body sensations. There's different things that just like that are going to trigger us. And so today I hope that my video can really help you understand what you are going through. Understand it's a normal and common trauma response. No, you're not crazy. No, you're not imagining this. And you know what you're struggling with? Yes, it's very, very real. So this video is about abuse, traumas, triggers, our 5 senses, and I'm going to talk a little bit about The Body Keeps the Score, a book by Dr. Bessel van der Kolk. So let's get started with our 5 senses. So what happens is when we are traumatized, there were certain surroundings that took place during the abuse, during the actual traumatic event. And so for an example, if you were in a room and it was really dark, you may actually have triggers in your adult life when you are in the dark. It is this memory of yours. And of course, this memory is cellular memory. It's stored in your body, even if you are not aware of it. And so something such as a trauma that's linked to darkness, and then your adult life, and you might have like fear of the dark, feel uncomfortable. You don't feel good about being in the dark. Maybe you need to sleep with a little nightlight on, or what have you. Understand that this is very common for trauma survivors. And so we're going to kind of dive deep into first the 5 senses, and then I will explain in more detail about the trauma response and go into various aspects about trauma and triggers and flashbacks, etc. Okay, so the 5 senses are sight, sound, taste, touch, and sense. Sense meaning like the aromas, a cigar, a flower, maybe a baked apple pie, maybe bad breath. Think about it. If you were abused by someone and just say they had horrible odor of whiskey. This perpetrator was drinking whiskey. They just smelled very badly. Maybe they smelled like cigars. Maybe they smelled like cigarettes or whiskey or beer. Then this is a memory that is now enmeshed in your body. And so let's stick with this. If they did smell like whiskey and cigars, and now you're an adult and you happen to be at a social function, let's just say it's a wedding. You're at a wedding, and that's supposed to be a happy occasion, right? But all of a sudden you get a whiff of some man who walks past you, and all of a sudden you could smell cigars and whiskey, and boom, just like that, you're triggered. You might not know what's happening. So you might not have a logical explanation initially because you might not be aware of the body and mind connection to trauma, to triggers, to flashbacks. But I want to explain, number 1, no, you're not going crazy. Number 2, this is a normal and common trauma response. So what can happen is all of our senses, eyesight, aromas, scent. So sight, sound, touch, scent, taste. It's all connected to traumatic events that we have been through. And obviously, the five senses are also linked to very positive experiences we've had in our childhood through our adulthood. And so we can come to this understanding that when we experience trauma and later on, just boom, just like that, we're triggered. And say, for an example, it's honeysuckles, okay? And when you were a child, you were abused. And you remember this beautiful honeysuckle. And when you were being abused, you disassociated, which means you basically disconnected to your body physically, emotionally, and spiritually. And again, disconnection and disassociation is very much a part of trauma. Not every trauma survivor, abuse survivor will disassociate, but some people do have this outer body experience, and it's survival mode. So this child's being traumatized and abused, okay? And they latch on to the honeysuckles. So they remember that they were abused and they were near this beautiful garden. And they had this outer body experience. And later in life, whenever they smell honeysuckles, and it could be someone's fragrance, and it can actually be the actual garden of honeysuckles or a vine of honeysuckles, they're triggered. So again, they have this initial response in their body. Maybe they have a racing heartbeat. Maybe they suddenly have a panic attack. Maybe they feel depression. Maybe they feel that they're immediately experiencing either fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. In some cases, it could easily be either the flight response, and that the flight response is your brain saying, I need to get out of here. I need to get out of here. Warning, warning, danger. Because the honeysuckles are connecting your past abuse, that you were this child and you were innocent and you were being physically violated. Maybe you were sexually violated and abused. Maybe it was mental abuse. But your body remembers the honeysuckles being connected to the trauma, to the abuse. So when you're an adult and you pass by, say, a vine of honeysuckles, you might be triggered because instantly your body remembers. So oftentimes survivors say, well, I don't remember anything. Again, very common, very normal. Some people have fragmented memories. Some people have bits and pieces of memories of their past abuse. Different things that could be a sight, a sound, a scent, a touch, a certain location can transport you back to that time when you were abused. It is a horrifying experience. I've personally experienced it. So, I am a trauma survivor. I'm not just a certified trauma recovery coach. I'm not just an educator or a teacher. I am also a survivor, and I understand how these triggers can really be uncomfortable and unpleasant. So I am validating your experience. Another thing could be sounds. So I had this follower of mine who shared that he was triggered. And so maybe he was like walking down the street, driving down the street, what have you. He overheard a car that had their stereo. Maybe the stereo was blasting and there was a specific song that was playing. And he said, boom, just like that, he was triggered. It kind of transported him back in time to when he was in his father's restaurant. His father was involved with the mafia. And he instantly just felt uncomfortable. And it was a trigger. And it was a normal response to hear this song, and that song goes back to his childhood and his body remembers that song. So even if he had forgotten about it for many years, just say, hey, he grew up, he's an adult, he's moved on with his life. And he is in the middle of a healing journey, which is a beautiful thing. But yet there he is, he hears this song, and boy, he's just kind of like thrown back into the childhood and aware of, oh my gosh, my body's sensing, danger, my body's sensing high alert. And so again, this is very common, and it is something that people who do experience abuse and trauma can experience, these various forms of trauma responses that are triggered by a sight, a sound, a touch, an aroma, a location, and on and on and on it goes. Okay, so another one could be that you're driving past your childhood home and say you haven't been there in a really, really long time, and this is the home where maybe when you were a teenager or when you were a child, it could even be if you were an adult, it could be at any age, but it could actually trigger you to pass by the home or the place of location where the abuse took place. And remember, this isn't about what's wrong with you. This is about what happened to you. So what happened to you, you were abused, you were harmed, you were hurt, you were bullied. It might have been physical, it might have been mental, it might have been sexual, spiritual. It could have been domestic violence, or it could have been several of these. And it is extremely horrifying for survivors to experience this, and then later in life to have to relive over and over and over again their past trauma, and to be triggered repeatedly, and to have flashbacks and other various forms of trauma responses. So another thing that I think is really important that we could come to understand is that highly sensitive people and empaths typically seem to be more in tune and attuned to energy in their surroundings. So it could be that you walk into a room, you're a highly sensitive person, and maybe you're an empath, maybe you're someone who just does have a tendency to be very sensitive to other people, places, and things. So you walk into this room, and let's just say you've never been at this place. So it's a building, you walk in, and let's just say it's a social function. And you walk in, and just like that, before you even speak to someone or lock eyes with someone, before you eat anything or start talking to people, you might immediately be so highly sensitive that you can attune to your environment and surroundings, and you could either sense, oh, this is a very happy place, this is a really great, fun occasion. Or you could walk into the room and sense, oh, something's going on. Oh, I sense tension. Oh, I don't feel safe. Something just doesn't feeling right. Something feels, and I call it feels off. And so whether you are someone who's highly sensitive or you are an empath, or maybe you're not, the point is that it's very common for us to be attuned to our surroundings and people and places and things and our five senses that are alerting us to whether something is good or bad or dangerous or safe. And we have to know that safety is a really big issue when it comes to abuse survivors and trauma. Safety is a top priority for each and every one of us. Next is that we have to understand that there are times we may be no contact or gray rock, or we may have family estrangement with various people in our lives. So whether it's gray rock, whether it's no contact, whether it's family estrangement, it could be that you walked away from, say it's your entire birth family, or say it's a spouse who domestically violated you, he physically violated you, and you're no longer in contact. And so what can happen is, for trauma survivors and abuse survivors, there can be times, unexpectedly, we may bump into one or more perpetrators who had abused us in our past. And so whether it was mental abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, spiritual abuse, or more, we can understand that it's very unpleasant. It could send us into flight or fight mode, maybe fawn. So flight mode is when your body is like, get out of here. I need to exit. I need to get out of here. I need to run. I need to remove myself from this person. If you are in fight mode, you might actually confront the person, and maybe you'll give them your 2 cents worth. Hey, no judgment here. I totally get it. I understand. Sometimes we may want to fight back, and it is just that internal animal instinct within us, this trauma response that just goes into fight mode, a trauma response. And then there might be someone else, maybe they're in fawn mode. Typically, fawn mode can happen if you had a narcissistic parent and you wanted to be compliant. You were basically enforced to be compliant and to be submissive to this narcissistic parent. And you might be in fawn mode. Now, fawning, the parent, such as the narcissistic mother or father, is a situation where you may have, as a child, desperately wanted to be loved, and you so deserve to receive love from your parent, but you may not have ever received tender, loving care from your parent. Instead, you may have been abused and manipulated, gaslit, criticized, judged, and beaten down decade after decade. And so fawn mode is when you may still have something subconsciously within you where you are trying to seek the approval, the acceptance, and the love of the narcissistic parent. Understand that this is tied in with a trauma bond and codependency. I'm not judging anyone. Hey, I myself experienced a trauma bond, and I definitely can say, yes, I most certainly did have codependency with my narcissistic mother, who is now deceased. And I am free and on the other side of healing. But let's get to the point that if you accidentally, unexpectedly bump into one or more perpetrators who abused you, instantly your body could go into not just fight, flight, freeze, or fawn mode, but then you're actually having different senses. Maybe it is the sense of smell. And say your mother wears perfume and she has a special fragrance that has roses, and it turns your stomach and you feel sick and nauseated and you feel unwell. And it triggers these memories of when you were a child and maybe she was physically, mentally, etc., abusing you in whichever manner it may have been. And you remembered those fragrance of roses, and she always wore this fragrance, she wore this perfume, and it lingered with you. And even if you forgot about the rose perfume, it could be that your body still remembers. And so as an adult, let's say you're out at a restaurant, you're having a good time, you're with your friends, it's a really great occasion, someone walks past you, maybe it's the waitress, she approaches you and woo, you could smell roses, and instantly your body's saying, danger, danger. And you have a racing heartbeat, anxiety. You feel like you need to escape. You need to get away. You don't feel good. You are triggered. And what's happening is the aroma of roses is alerting you, and it's taking you back. So it's transporting you back in time to when you were younger and when you were abused, and that person who harmed you was wearing the rose fragrance, and it may have been perfume. So understand that this all ties in with triggers and flashbacks. So it all ties in also to our nervous system, and our nervous system will alert us. It will alert us with the racing heartbeat, with the panic attacks, with the anxiety, with this internal alarm system saying, danger, danger, time to escape. And so your body is doing what it knows to do. And it's just like you are in survival mode. You are in survival mode. But understand, again, this is normal. And it is about what happened to you. And what happened to you? You were maliciously abused. You were violated. Yes, it feels horrible. It's scary sometimes. It could be terrifying. And no, we don't want to be triggered. But now I have to really talk about this because this is really, really, really important. If we try to ignore and bury our trauma and our pain and we avoid being triggered, we're just like, no, not going there, not going there, not going there. Oh, no. It's actually doing us more harm than good. It keeps us stuck in a very maladaptive coping mechanism. So what's the coping mechanism? Well, for one person, it might be flight. They're triggered, boom, they get prompted into flight mode. They want to get out of the situation and escape. They feel like they want someone to rescue them. They need to basically survive. They feel like they're in danger. Again, very common, very normal. But we cannot heal if we bury our feelings, our emotions, our body sensations, including our five senses. We cannot outrun trauma. See, trauma will always be there. Even if you forgot, it is there. It's enmeshed in every one of your cells, epigenetics, cellular memory. We're back to that again. And so you can't outrun trauma. And the best way to approach this is to observe your triggers, your flashbacks, your body sensations with the five senses. Observe it. Don't judge it. Don't beat yourself up. Give yourself compassion. Sometimes the greatest, kindest act is to just gently sit with our inner child who was abused. Comfort them. Think of yourself holding them, just holding them, rocking them in your arms, holding them, and letting them know you are safe now. You are safe. We're not there. We're not there anymore. We're safe. We're good. I've got you. I'm taking care of you. And we speak loving, kind words to our inner child. We remind them the trauma's over. You're just having this internal response. It's normal. We're okay. It's really helpful. So one thing that's really important to understand too for people who are in this really horrible timeline where they're not yet facing their triggers and flashbacks and trauma. And understand, I'm not judging you. I'm just speaking of facts now. We're speaking of facts. So in statistics, 80% of women who were abused now have manifested chronic pain, autoimmune conditions, cancer, panic attacks, PTSD, complex PTSD, anxiety, depression, thyroid problems, all kind of autoimmune situations such as fibromyalgia. So in these statistics, and I do share this in my book, Soul Rescue, How to Break Free from Narcissistic Abuse and Heal Trauma. Okay, so if you want to check out that, you may do so at your own time. But the point is, we are harming ourselves. We are doing a disservice to ourselves when we numb out, when we take flight, when we ignore, minimize, bury, or push down and stuff our trauma, triggers, flashbacks, and painful memories. Now, I'm not saying it's easy to face it, to process it, to address it. Hey, I'm a trauma survivor. It is not easy to just move on. And here's the thing. For those people who say, just let it go, just move on. We will never just move on. We cannot just let it go because the body keeps the score. Okay, here we go. The Body Keeps the Score by Dr. Bessel van der Kolk. Check out this book. I highly recommend it. I'm going to read a quote from his book, and we can understand that, yes, many of us who at one time did not face our trauma, did not face our triggers, are now dealing with the aftermath. You see, there is a toll of trauma that takes place. It's physical, it's emotional, it's spiritual, it's on many, many different levels. We might have fibromyalgia. We might have an immune disorder. We might have other medical conditions. There's people who have addictions because they cannot cope with their past and they're using drinking or drugs or another form of addiction, whether it's a food addiction, et cetera, et cetera. You know, there's so many different forms of addictions, but addictions are directly rooted to trauma. And so instead of numbing out, instead of burying it, instead of stuffing our pain, we need to feel it in order to heal it. So let's talk about Dr. Bessel van der Kolk and The Body Keeps the Score. So in his book on page 97, to do with losing your body and losing yourself, he has a section, page 97, on agency. And it's about owning your life. It's about taking responsibility for you and your healing journey. So first thing first, though, before I get into that, no, you're not at fault for your abuse. It's not your fault. You did nothing wrong. However, as adults, we are responsible for our healing journey and our emotional wellness. So he says, agency is about owning our life. And he says agency starts with what scientists call interoception, which is our awareness of our subtle sensory, which is body-based feelings. And he says the greater that awareness, the greater our potential to control our lives. Knowing what we feel is the first step to knowing why we feel that way. And so basically he's stating in this book, The Body Keeps a Score, that building awareness about our body sensations, a sensory awareness, the five senses, sight, sound, scent, taste, touch. We need to build awareness. We need to be aware. That is part of the healing journey, is building awareness. And that's why I say it's very important to educate ourselves about abuse, about the aftermath, about the normal trauma response, understanding and educating ourselves about trauma so we can recover, so we can heal, so we're not in chronic pain, so we're not dealing with all these horrible trauma responses, such as being thrown into fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response. And so we have to understand that it's fine to observe our triggers non-judgmentally, and we can gradually become in tune to our body sensations, to our physical environment, and to even things that are not seen with the naked eye. So for example, we're back to the honeysuckles, or we're back to the roses, or the whiskey, the aroma, or I should actually say the horrible odor of cigars and whiskey, and how it transports us back to that childhood abuse. So instead of avoiding that, instead of running and burying and hiding and denying our own conscious reality, we come home to ourselves. We learn about trauma. We seek emotional support. It's so vital and essential in our trauma recovery that we seek emotional support with a trauma-informed professional. It might be a psychologist. It might be a licensed therapist or a counselor. It might be someone such as myself, a certified trauma recovery coach. I always say we need to choose someone who's a good fit for us. And okay, so someone says, well, how do I know who's a good fit? They have to specialize in the exact trauma and abuse that you suffered. So for an example, if you suffer narcissistic abuse, you don't want to go to a person, a professional, who has never, ever been educated or aware or personally experienced narcissistic abuse. They're not a good fit for you because they don't have that experience. They don't have that knowledge. They don't have the capability to give you what you want because they never themselves educated themselves or were trained in narcissistic personality disorder or narcissistic abuse. So depending on your trauma and your abuse, that is the best way to determine who you should go to, such as someone who specializes. So if it was, say, sibling abuse, choose someone who has sibling abuse as their specialty. If it was something more to do with addictions, find someone who is specializing in addictions. So always pick someone and do your research. And it is fine to actually interview them beforehand, meaning ask questions. What is your experience? Did you personally go through this? Did you actually have a childhood where you were traumatized or abused? It really helps that we find someone who is a good fit for us, because then we feel heard, we feel sane, we feel understood, we feel validated. And it promotes a trustworthy client-professional relationship, which produces benefits to our healing journey. So please share with me, are you an abuse survivor, or did you experience trauma? Have you noticed that you've been triggered or had flashbacks that are linked to the five senses? So the sight, the sound, the touch, the taste, the aroma. And have you been working with someone? Maybe you're right now seeking emotional support. If so, is it helping you? So do what you need to do to take care of you. Again, I highly recommend the book, The Body Keeps a Score. Education is so essential. Keep learning, keep growing. And I guarantee if you are on this pathway where you are open to learning and educating yourself and doing the hard work of the trauma recovery, I sincerely believe that you will get to the other side of healing. And so share with me your experiences, like my videos, subscribe to my channel, and you could visit me at DanaArcuri.com. Thank you and have a beautiful day.